Let's be clear about one thing. This phase has a purpose. The feeling that something has to give is correct. Something does. It's the old structure of your life. The increased pressure is a sign that the transformation is imminent. It's the final resistance before a permanent shift. If you're watching this, you're likely in that final stretch, the part that feels the worst. But it's also the part that leads directly to the breakthrough. Trust the process. The system under pressure. Ever notice how things seem to fall apart right before they finally come together? The timing feels unfair, like the world is pressing down just when you're trying to rise. But that pressure isn't random. It's what happens when a system, whether it's your life or your mind, starts outgrowing its old design. Systems always look for balance. They build patterns, routines, ways of maintaining order. And as long as that structure supports growth, it stays steady. But once that same balance starts to limit expansion, it has to wobble. It has to destabilize before the next level can settle in. The human experience follows that same rule. When a season of your life is ending, it doesn't slip away quietly. It resists. Relationships that once felt safe begin to fade. The plans that used to work suddenly glitch. You start to question choices you never doubted before. It feels deeply personal, almost punishing, but what's actually happening is more mechanical than emotional. The system that is your life is beginning to reject outdated configurations. The same way a computer freezes before a system update, your energy pauses before evolution. You can't see it yet, but under that frozen surface, something new is already being installed. Think about tectonic plates under the earth. They don't separate smoothly. They grind, they resist, they build friction until the whole planet trembles. That shaking isn't destruction, it's release. It's the only way energy trapped for too long can move again. The breakdown you're living through works just like that. It rattles you because your internal structure can't hold the new frequency with old wiring. What looks like chaos is the process of recalibration. In systems thinking, this is called disequilibrium. It's the stage where the old order can no longer sustain itself, but hasn't quite transformed yet. Every developing system passes through it. The weather, an ecosystem, even economies. The same truth applies inside you. Disequilibrium isn't failure, it's feedback. It's your signal that reorganization has already begun. The very sense of heaviness you feel, that unusual silence between waves of emotion, is the system gathering data. It's assessing what stays, what releases, what evolves. And here's something most people miss. The pressure doesn't build because you're weak. It builds because your system is processing outdated scripts. The part of you that managed, endured, and survived under certain conditions is finally meeting the limits of those conditions. You're not breaking down, you're debugging. Every emotional crash, every confusing fog is a form of code rewriting itself. Your old patterns can't run the new program, so they slow, jam, and collapse until you stop forcing them to work. That moment you call exhaustion might actually be the point where the old operating system gives up control. Overwhelm, then, isn't a punishment. It's proof. It shows that the upgrade process is active. When electrical circuits short just before being repaired, they spark, and that tiny flash is the sign voltage is moving again. Likewise, the discomfort you feel right now is movement, energy reorganizing itself into alignment. It's subtle but precise. Every headache, sleepless night, or sudden wave of emotion is the mind and body syncing to the new setup. Even confusion has a place in this. You start questioning who you've become and where you belong, because identity itself is shifting into a broader form. Reframing the experience changes everything. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to see the data behind it. Each breakdown is information. The universe doesn't send random crashes. It sends updates disguised as setbacks. Once you start reading feelings as feedback, you start responding instead of reacting. The old loop of fix, fix, fix turns into quiet observation. Then clarity begins to surface, not because life got easier, but because you stopped interpreting pressure as punishment. You recognized it as a message. So when things start slipping, resist the urge to fight the slide. Let your system shake. Let old attachments release. What feels like instability is actually the bridge between structures. On one side is the version of you that survived. On the other is the one that's ready to live. The heaviness, the chaos, the fatigue. It's all measurable data from your inner system showing you that recalibration is occurring. You're rebooting. And this phase is the loading screen. The patterns collapsing now are making space for a higher order of balance to take root. And that's the signal most people miss. The weight you've been carrying isn't there to break you. It's the proof that your system is alive and realigning. The update is already underway. The old software is being deleted in the background, even while your surface feels frozen. Let the process finish. Because once it does, the clarity you've been chasing won't arrive as noise. It'll arrive as silence. Now, let's look at why this breakdown feels so personal, even though it's happening to everyone. The resistance before liberation. Why do we fight freedom even when we say we want it? It sounds strange, doesn't it? We talk about wanting more peace, more confidence, more purpose. But when that change starts moving toward us, something inside quietly taps the brakes. That's inner resistance. It's not laziness or lack of will. It's wiring. The human mind was built to keep you alive, not necessarily to keep you evolving. So it clings to whatever feels predictable, even if that predictability is painful. Safety always wins over expansion in a system that still believes danger is around every corner. That's why the first step toward real freedom often feels like anxiety, not relief. The mind's instinct is to preserve what it already understands. For it, new equals unknown, and unknown equals unsafe. So when your life starts to stretch, the survival part of your brain tries to pull you back to consistency. It doesn't care if that consistency is a job that drains you or a relationship that's run its course. It just wants the baseline to stay familiar. The paradox is that we crave growth, but we also crave control. And those two drives can't exist in the same space for long. This tug of war shows up in small ways every day. You wake up with an idea to finally start that project. But then halfway through the morning, your energy dips, and thoughts like, maybe later, or I'm too tired, start whispering in. It's not random. It's the system conserving its structure. Confusion, procrastination, and even sudden fatigue are clever disguises of fear. They appear to slow you down just enough so that you don't wander too far outside the safety zone. The irony is that what you call inconsistency is your inner defense system, keeping you from breaking the old loop. In systems thinking, resistance is just feedback. It's the loop pushing against new input to see if it can maintain its stability. Every living system does this before it adapts. Think about a thermostat trying to hold a room at one temperature. The moment something changes, like a door opening, it reacts. That pushback doesn't mean the system is broken. It means it's doing its job. Your internal resistance works the same way. It's not trying to ruin you. It's testing the limits of what can stay the same before the old energy runs out. And that's the turning point, when there's simply not enough fuel left to keep repeating. Growth begins right there, at the threshold where resistance meets exhaustion. Like a butterfly inside a cocoon, there's a point where the pressure becomes too much. The cocoon that once protected starts to suffocate if it stays sealed. The butterfly can't grow wings unless it resists the shell from the inside. Its struggle isn't proof that it's weak. It's the act that makes flight possible. The more the butterfly pushes, the stronger its wings get. Our lives unfold the same way. The tension between comfort and expansion builds until one side gives, and freedom finally wins. Think about staying in a job that quietly drains you. You tell yourself it's practical, that it pays the bills, that maybe it's not that bad. But every morning, a small part of you feels heavier when you wake up. Weeks turn into months, and you start seeing little signs: a lack of energy, irritability, endless distraction. That discomfort isn't punishment, it's data. The system is signaling that the identity connected to that environment is beginning to collapse. You stay until the pain of staying outweighs the fear of leaving. And the moment that shift happens, deep resistance starts to soften. Resistance always peaks right before a breakthrough. It's the final defense of the old system before surrender. The same way the storm rages strongest right before it clears, that inner pushback reaches its loudest just before it loses power. The trick is to recognize it for what it is, a sign that transformation is close. When you can step back and observe the resistance rather than wrestle it, you've already made the leap out of the old loop. Observation breaks identification. The moment you see the fight for what it is, you become something larger than it. And that's liberation in its purest form. Freedom doesn't start when everything changes. It starts when your awareness grows wider than the pattern itself. You don't need to crush resistance. You just have to see it clearly. Once seen, it can't rule you. It starts dissolving on its own, piece by piece. You stop mistaking fear for guidance, and suddenly the path ahead stops looking impossible. The resistance was never the enemy. It was the signal that evolution had already begun. Once you understand that, you stop fearing struggle. You start reading it. And with that awareness, you can finally explore the next stage, how chaos itself becomes creation. When chaos becomes a signal, ever notice how life feels the most chaotic right before clarity shows up? It's strange how everything can fall apart just when you think you finally got things figured out. Chaos feels like life is spinning wild, like the ground under your feet is shifting faster than you can catch it. But chaos isn't random. It's coded information. It's the language of change. In every system, whether it's nature, relationships, or your own internal world, chaos is the stage, right before reorganization. It's where new order starts growing beneath the disorder. In system theory, every stable pattern eventually pushes against its limits. The moment that structure can't expand any further, it begins to break down. Temperature rises before a storm. Pressure builds before a chemical shift. It's all part of the natural rhythm of renewal. The same rhythm applies to your life. When your routines wear thin and your mind no longer finds comfort in old roles or familiar people, your system is entering a phase of constructive collapse. It's uncomfortable, but it's also intelligent. The breakdown is your inner world preparing to assemble something new. What makes this stage so hard is how personal it feels. When your sense of identity starts shifting, it doesn't announce itself with calm insight. It arrives through endings. Friendships quietly fade. Careers lose their spark. Habits that once kept you steady suddenly backfire. You might even wake up one morning confused about what you want, who you trust, or what direction is even up anymore. It feels like life is asking more questions than ever before, when all you want are answers. But what's really happening is that your system is reorganizing from the inside out. The old structure can't interpret the new data yet. This misinterpretation is what most people call failure. They think falling apart means they've done something wrong. But it's not punishment, it's adaptation. The same way forests use fire to clear old growth so sunlight can reach new roots. Your chaos is just removing what no longer belongs in your next evolution. Every disconnection, every confusion point is a feedback signal asking you to stop forcing control and start listening to what's surfacing underneath the noise. You're not losing direction, you're being redirected. In complex systems, chaos is the network finding its next level of order. That's true on every scale: atoms, weather, even galaxies. A moment of disorder is built into the math of how stability returns. Non-linear systems swing wide before settling into a new rhythm. It's the same for you. The emotional storms that come with transformation aren't random mood changes. They're fluctuations guiding the system toward a higher alignment. What feels like falling apart is often the hidden blueprint of renewal being drawn in real time. Here's something subtle you learn. Once you stop fighting chaos, there's a pattern under it. The noise isn't noise if you start paying attention closely enough. You begin to notice certain themes repeating, the same lessons showing up through different people, the same emotions surfacing in different forms. That's the system's way of coding feedback. When you respond differently, even once, the loop begins to reorganize. You're teaching the system a new function just by staying conscious during the storm. There's a shift that happens when you stop trying to fix the chaos and start listening to it. The panic softens. The story you tell yourself about what's going wrong turns into questions about what's being revealed. You start noticing that behind the mess, there's movement. Clarity begins to appear in flashes, small, silent realizations that maybe the endings aren't mistakes. Maybe they're signals that something bigger is making space. That's when chaos stops feeling like an enemy and starts feeling like instruction. Slowly, you begin reading the signs differently. The argument that forced distance becomes a lesson in boundaries. The opportunity that fell apart becomes proof that alignment won't tolerate shortcuts anymore. Even exhaustion starts to look less like defeat and more like a natural pause between cycles. Suddenly, you're not panicking about losing control. You're curious about what this instability might be shaping. That's when chaos loses its threat. You start speaking its language. And when you can interpret the language of change, you stop looking for balance in the old sense of the word. You begin to trust that instability is part of balance too. The chaos doesn't stop. It just stops feeling destructive. It turns into communication, signals pointing you where stability is ready to return in a stronger form. That's why people who have gone through deep change often seem calm in uncertainty. They've learned that disruption is the beginning, not the end. Once you hear that frequency beneath the noise, clarity comes quietly. It doesn't rush in. It emerges, patient and sure. And from that point on, breaking free isn't some distant goal. It becomes the obvious next step, the only step left to take. If you're hearing these words, it's not random. This message found you because you're in that quiet stage between endings and arrival. Every heavy moment, every bit of confusion is calibration happening behind the scenes. The system that is your life knows what it's doing, even when you don't. Breaking points aren't collapse. They're evidence the old structure has finished its job. Trust that, because once you break free, you'll see what all that pressure was for. The weight wasn't punishment. It was the proof of expansion, the sign that you were already stepping beyond your limits.